Hi there. When I was in Japan, Terry and I got to meet many significant instructors, and amongst the most notable was Don Draeger, who had written several books that we both enjoyed reading many years previously. And Don held dozens of downgrades and master certifications in numerous traditional martial arts of Japan. So we really wanted to meet him, and somehow Terry was in touch with a chap called Howard Alexander, a Canadian, who was training in stick fighting in Japan, and we arranged to meet him at Chuken Hachiko, the dog statue at Shibuya Station, and he would then take us to meet Don at the headquarters of the Jodo, the stick fighting. So those of you who know Terry or have read about him in my book will not be too shocked to discover that we were late. Can't remember the reason why. Terry goes off on tangents, looks in shops, and somehow the time adds up and we were over an hour late. And surprise, surprise, Howard wasn't there. And Terry actually got upset with this. And I pointed out that people don't usually wait an hour to meet strangers to do them a favor. And but Terry had been given directions of how to find the dojo and the nearest bus stop, and it was Chuo Gunji Byoin, and that resonated with me. On Japanese buses, as a stop's approaching, there's a recording, a girl in a very lilting voice chants out the name of the stop, and it stuck in my mind. I'd heard this, and I realized it was on my bus route. So I said, oh yeah, I know where that is. So we got the bus from Shibuya and we got off at the Central Military Hospital, which is what it was. And but then the big problem is finding the dojo, because all the signs, if there are signs, are in Japanese kanji. So we were at a bit of a loss, but fortunately there was a police box, a koban, which are a great institution in Japan. They're all over the place. It's a small structure with a police officer, a map of the area, a telephone line, and a kettle. So we approached the officer, and by that time I could speak enough Japanese to ask directions to the Jodo dojo. And he said, judo. He was saying, no, Jodo, explained it's stick, Jodo. Terry's getting a bit irate and going, you bloody learn this stuff. You know, the Japanese police trained in the stick fighting. And eventually, after a little bit, he understood, Jodo, and it was just the other side of the road. So we went in, and I at long last met Don Draeger, and he was everything that we hoped. In fact, he turned out to be not just a fountain of knowledge on everything, but a terrific human being. And you just wanted to sit and listen to him, but he was just as equally interested in what you had to say, and he would question you, he'd talk to you. And we had several meetings with him, one of which he introduced us to a judo 10th Dan, Master Ito. Following these meetings, these informal meetings where we chat, Don invited us to, he'd relocated to Chiba area, and he invited us there. It was a train ride out. We went out and we met him there. And one of the things he did was to show us videos he'd made while researching Southeast Asian martial arts out in Indonesia and the surrounding countries. And one of the videos which really resonated with us was of a guy showing knife work. And as Don said, how would you disarm him? You know, it was like putting your hand in a meat grinder. And none of the systems that I'd been trained in knife defense would have had a chance of coping with that kind of attack. And that was really the start of what became my own venture into the Southeast Asian edged weapon training. And Don used to regularly have these expeditions into the jungles, and he would meet with people in rather remote villages. And he said if you ask them about their traditional martial arts, they won't tell you anything. He said, so what we used to do, he'd go there with a group of martial artists, is ask permission to do some training, and they'd get their swords and sticks out and start doing the Japanese weapons training, and they'd get a crowd around them, and then guys would start producing their weapons and exchange ideas. And that's how he researched, and he wrote several books about these hitherto very, very little known systems. This intrigued Terry, and he said to me, should we ask Don if we could go on one of these expeditions to the jungle? I said, you're joking. I said, it's bad enough in Japan, the cockroaches in Japan, kokubori, are bad enough. I said, you're certainly not going to enjoy the jungle. Neither was I, but I was just a bit more realistic. So the other thing he did when we were at Chiba was he arranged a demonstration with one of his colleagues in the Kotori Shinto Ryo, the oldest tradition of several of the weapons training methods in Japan. And this was absolutely jaw-dropping. It really was a demonstration of a martial art rather than a sport or an exhibition of an artistic. This was like a fight contained within certain set parameters, and the power and speed of both of them, but particularly Don, when he manipulated the sword and the stick in various ways, was absolutely breathtaking. So we come on to the book that I want to talk about, which is a tribute to the life of Don Draeger, and simply called Draeger, as you can see from the cover picture. And a big chunk of it was written by Robert W. Smith, who knew Don initially back in the United States, and then he stayed with him in Japan. Don had this big house when he was living in Tokyo, in Ichigaya, and many of the guys, the foreigners, the gaijin training in the martial arts over there, primarily judo, but the other weapon systems and so on, stayed in Ichigaya with him. And it was quite an interesting collection. And one of the chaps who stayed there was the Chinese instructor from Taiwan, Wang Su-chin, who taught Xingyi. And he astounded everyone. He could take anyone's punch. And so this is all recounted by Robert W. Smith. He also talks about Don being the senior foreign instructor at the Kodokan. And one of Don's contributions was to introduce judo there, to some resistance from the old guard, who didn't think it fitted in with judo. but obviously sensible and relevant weight training adds to any physical activity. And one of Don's proteges there was the famous champion Inukuma, and Don trained him in the weights, and it didn't impair his flexibility one little bit. Another section of the book concerns the historicity of Miyamoto Musashi, the famous Japanese swordsman, and he has achieved a mythical status rather like Robin Hood in England. And Don has, in a lengthy essay, sorted out the fact from fiction. And I always think that with a lot of these stories, the reality is actually more interesting than the fiction once you get down to it, and so that's good. There's quite a bit in the book about written by Don's colleagues in hopology. He set up a hopology study center in Hawaii at the university there, and hopology is the study of weapons. And by studying weapons, you can study migration, you can study various types of warfare, you can have archaeological implications and so on. And really the science of hopology was the brainchild of Don Draeger. So I really recommend the book. It keeps alive the memory of a very, very significant leader in the distribution of knowledge of traditional martial arts. One day while I was training in yogi, Don turned up at the dojo, and what us foreigners were told to do whenever foreigners turned up was to go over to them and invite them in to sit down. So I went out and said to Don, come in and sit down. He said, no, I'm okay, I'll stand here. He was quite self-effacing, and I resumed training, and one of the seniors, Kokobo, came over to me and he said, is that Draeger sensei? And I said, yes. He said, I thought so. I could tell by his arms. And Don's arms were like the gnarled branches of a big tree. All the different weapons he'd studied had each given a different type of musculature to his arms, and they were his whole physique was outstanding, but his arms in particular. So you had this visual image of someone who was rather exceptional, but Don himself never tried to project that he was anything out of the ordinary, but he most definitely was. And his death from a form of cancer in 1982 came all too soon, but he did leave a major impact on the martial arts scene, which continues to this day.